Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Real to Real Talk. I am Sergio Barrera, and it's time once again to talk all things movies. Joining me, as always, is the other Real to Real Talker, Paul Britton,
Yeah, baby.
who happens to be having a birthday. Happy birthday, Paul.
Thank you. Yep, it is my birthday today, and there's nothing I'd rather do than talk movies with my friend Sergio. So
Well,
it's
I
good.
appreciate that. Finally 29. So,
Yes, it's been a
yeah.
long time coming, but
Yeah, no, happy birthday, my friend. It's
Thank you.
it was funny because my mind always goes into like self-care mode and take care of my friends, and I was like, hey, maybe we should push, and you're like, heck no, and I'm like, okay, well, what better way to celebrate your birthday than to do this? So
Yeah, let's do
thank
it.
you for
Yeah.
wanting to do this. And we're going to do some interesting stuff. We have done this, what we're going to do tonight, once before. And we were able to see a movie, watch its foreign film counterpart,
Yeah.
and then the release itself.
Yep.
And we did it with Force Majeure, and I
Yes.
can't think. Was it what was it called?
Oh boy, the American version.
Yeah, we didn't know which one was better.
Oh boy.
Downhill,
Yeah, that's right.
something like that.
Yep. That's right.
And so I'm excited that tonight we'll reveal the movie here in just a moment. That we're going to have a chance to do that again because it pushes us in a direction to see a film that maybe we wouldn't have thought to see, and do a bit of a comparison contrast. We'll also, of course, do our weekly segments, and we will finish out with a review on a release that came out this past week called "Don't Worry, Darling." So quite a bit to cover as we get started on this birthday edition of Real to Real Talk, which is also, by the way, our 139th episode.
That has
I like to celebrate odd numbers. Like people say, is it 150? No, it's 139.
That's
And
139. That's
yeah.
huge.
So if you've arrived to join us, you are here on a special day all the way around. So 139 episodes in. Yeah.
One for every year of my life.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But so here we go. Paul, the movie that we decided to compare and contrast this time around had the same title. Goodnight, Mommy.
Well, okay, let's be honest.
I mean,
the international release used the title Goodnight, Mommy. The Austrian release used Ixa. And so, but yes, you are correct. Ostensibly had this,
according to the posters I found.
Right.
But yeah, so here we have a movie that week to week, as we decide what movies we're going to feature and what we're going to talk about, we try to make sure we catch streamers as much as theater releases. And this one had been on my radar, but really only for the sake of I'm going to probably have to review it for the show. But when you shared with me that there was an Austrian version that was released in 2014.
And it was available on Tubi.
Yes, absolutely. Although the Prime Video thing is there because I paid for it.
Understood.
I didn't find it on Tubi. It was supposedly on Vudu in what I found, but I wasn't able to get to it. Anyway, the point is, the first film, the cats are fighting. Not fighting. They're tussling.
Playing.
Yeah. The Austrian version is available, and the premise of this film is two young boys arrive back home. Yes, they're boys. Arrive home to find that there is a woman in their home who claims to be their mother. She is wrapped in bandages from a surgical procedure.
Yes.
And the boys become suspicious that this is not their mother.
Right.
And so the film plays out as they work to figure out who is this stranger in our house.
Yeah. The woman went through plastic surgery, and that's why she's bandaged up. So it's there is a reason for her to be bandaged up, but also that would be a great opportunity for someone to just be like, oh, well, I look a little different, and now I am taking over your mom's life.
Right. And so it causes enough doubt in the minds of these two children and they proceed to do what they feel is necessary in order to try to uncover the mystery of who this woman is.
Yeah.
And both versions stay very, it's hard to say, stay true to one another, I guess. Like
no, it would be the second version
stays true to the first.
Sort of true to the first.
Sort of, yeah. A little message there from you from our pal Susan Bruiser.
Thank you.
And as is often the case,
yeah,
one is much better than the other.
I agree with you. And in this case, I think that there is just no way American audiences would tolerate
not
what
a
happens
chance
in the Austrian version.
Not a chance.
No way. Like, just some of the things that they do that, like, forget some of the things that the kids do in this in the Austrian version are like, Naomi Watts isn't gonna let this happen to her. Like,
right.
Yeah. And
so
sure enough.
Paul, I wanted to ask you before we dive deeper into the two films.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you your thoughts on that. What is it about the international market or you know, films from other countries? What is different that allows for a movie like this to be made in, you know, in such a graphic, violent, yet well told form? What are we?
They're just not worried about box office. They are not worried about they are not worried about how many people are going to see the movie at all. They just don't care. They are going to put out what they feel like is the best possible movie. Hey, look, and I'm not here to say that international movies always translate to our audience. Like, you and I have fell victim to very frequently movies that just haven't worked that were international movies for us, you know. Two, that they're necessarily going to be, you know, better or, you know, but there is always going to be this a difference in what you're going to find with international fare, and that difference can frequently be captivating. I'm not necessarily going to say good. I think captivating is the right way to say it. Because honestly, I finished the movie and I was like, oh God, this is not a movie I need to see twice. I was dreading the next day sitting down and watching the Prime version.
And I watched them back to back. Relatively back to back within the same day. And yeah, it was. I after the finish, I started like you with the Austrian version, and was so troubled.
Oh, it's so.
But again, not by, when I say troubled, not by the film as a whole, as a piece, but as in the way in which each beat of this story executed by the children in this film, which I believe are twins in the Austrian version.
They're twins in the American version.
Are they in both?
Too.
Okay, because I felt like there was a slight difference in age in terms of the Prime version.
No.
But the way in which the positions that the children were put in, the story beats of how this story plays out, and just the absolute the no holds barred in my I'm going to describe it as violence.
It's brutal.
It's brutal.
It is absolutely brutal.
Yet the denouement of the story in the Austrian version, for me, is so much more effective for it.
So much more effective. And
as a result of this being what we see.
And this is a case where I wish I could do like a temporary brainwash and have not known what I knew going into the second one, because I would love to hear from somebody who hadn't seen the Austrian version to say, oh, actually, the American version was just as effective, because I didn't think it was. And and not just because of the garish brutality from the Austrian version, but because the Austrian version really commits
Mm-hmm.
to the doubt.
Right.
And there's so much doubt, and I'm not even just talking about the children's doubt about their mother.
Right.
There's just, it commits to everything, and as a result, it does a lot better job of really hiding a lot of information from you,
Mm-hmm.
and being way more M. Night Shyamalanian than the Amazon Prime version ends up being. And as I mean, as a result, you really wonder in the Amazon Prime version. At least I did. I was like, where are these kids getting off? Like, what is happening here that make these kids think that this isn't their mother?
Right.
Whereas in the Austrian version, there is enough implied. They do a great job of implying supernatural potential
Right.
causation that it really explains everything.
Right. Yeah.
Everything. Just even the presence of the supernatural, which turns out to not really even be there at all, but just the presence of it just sells so much. And
Right.
and yeah.
The both movies have a definite sense of adults not being very smart, because they both have scenes where there are moments of tension built upon someone coming to the house
Mm-hmm.
to check on things that are going on, and the kids are able to maneuver their way around these adults arriving. I thought that the Austrian version's scene, in which we get first, they're aid workers,
Right.
whereas in the Prime version they're police officers.
Right.
I thought the Austrian version was far more effective, and there was
Yeah.
even some humor in terms of how it played through.
Really funny how it plays out,
It really is.
which just contrasts, like, and it, even though the Austrian version is so much darker, it that humor plays better because you really need it. Like, you really need that humor. Whereas in Goodnight in the Austrian version, it would have fell out of place because it would have definitely. I mean, even you look at the movie posters, and that tells you everything you need to know, because the tone for the Prime is just, it works. It relies so heavily on just being dark and heavy and foreboding. Whereas Goodnight Mommy, the Austrian version, has this, this sort of, freedom, sense of freedom for the kids. But with this weirdness wrapped around them, and yeah, it's just, it works. I don't know.
Yeah. It was one of those things where, by the time you get to the Prime version, as you mentioned a moment, it leans so much into the dark that if you've seen the first one, you realize that it doesn't lean enough, and it won't. It won't, because of the way in which the Western mind, or maybe not the Western mind, but the American mind of movie watcher will only tolerate so much. Right. I think there are some good things. I think Naomi Watts in the very first, probably third of the film, does an effective job of sort of playing up the gravity of the tension of the moment of, not being able to be, or not being seen as the mother. Right. There are some things that she does that really, are effective. I think what suffers, one of the things that suffers in the Prime version for me, is these two kids in this version don't seem near as menacing as the the kids that we got in the Austrian version. Yeah. And so, if I try to separate this film from its original source, I would have watched this movie and gone, okay, I get where we're going, but these kids are a little too, they don't seem really into the moment, I guess, of building this kind of tension. One thing that I was struck by was how in the defining act that occurred that reveals where we are and what's really happening, and I think this is where the Prime version tried to make up for it. The act that occurred was far more violent.
Yes.
In the Prime version.
Very, very American.
Exactly.
Very American.
Very.
And I do think that works. I do want to say that works.
It almost levels it up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you have to wait a long time to get there.
But
so
here's the thing. Through Act 2, the kids in the Austrian version, your sympathy level for them is like way up here, whereas the kids' sympathy version and level in the Prime version is like right around here. And then they fall so much, and the kids in the Prime version only fall like that much.
Correct.
And it's like that swing in the Austrian version is just
pretty dramatic,
jarring. It's a really difficult movie to watch.
Yeah.
If you don't want a difficult movie to watch and you just want to get a general idea of what happened, the Prime version is not difficult to watch.
Correct.
Flat out. It's just not very difficult to watch. The Austrian version, though, is really, really difficult to watch.
Yeah, it's challenging.
But the payoff really genuinely is worth it. Interesting fact, that was Austria's entrant as a potential Oscar nominee for for 2014. Yeah, so
I did not know that.
Yeah, it didn't get nominated. It didn't make the final list of 5, but it was their submission. Yeah, so yeah,
very effective movie. So let me ask you this, and I'm going to try to ask it in a non-spoiler way. So walk with me.
Sure.
At the conclusion of the Austrian version, you are 100% certain as to the fate of all the characters.
Definitely not.
No?
Disagree.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Because I felt, because of how it played out.
Yeah.
I felt that there was, for me, a doubt as to, not a doubt, but, oh man, how do I say this?
I will say in the moment, you don't have a doubt. In the moment of when it's occurring, there's no doubt. But then the sort of the coda gives you doubt.
See, I thought, okay, so let me see if this works.
Okay.
In the Austrian version, I was 100% sure in my mind that 3, whereas in the American version, I was sure it was 2.
Interesting. Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
No, I do see what you're saying.
And all because of the placement of those final images and how they played out. I feel like the American version, and if, again, that's my speculation. If I'm right, then this is what I say. If I'm right, you're left with this notion. Did one?
No, I in the American version, I don't feel like there is any. I actually felt the opposite. I felt like in the American version, you kind of know, all right, this is where we are with, where people are.
Yeah.
And I felt like in the Austrian version, at first I was like, oh, okay, so here's where we are, and then like something happens, and it's like, oh, that is okay. So I don't think I think something else might have happened there then. And
and for those who are watching, when you because I will say, check the Prime version out. Be warned if you check the Austrian version out. Be warned. We tried to warn you.
Yeah.
Both are good films. Yeah. One for me is better than the other. I prefer the Austrian version way more.
And I would never watch the Austrian version ever again.
I agree.
But it's significantly better.
I am proud I got through it.
Yeah.
And therein lies its effectiveness. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it does what movies sometimes do, where it's like it leaves you being the one to form the conclusion in your mind.
I didn't for the record, I didn't dislike the Prime version. Like, if all I had known about was the Prime version, movie. And all I did was see the Prime version, I would have been like, oh, this is really good.
Yeah. I see it as an attempt at what the first movie did.
Yeah.
If standing on its own, I would have enjoyed it as a good mystery.
Yeah.
That really, really, was effective. So no, I enjoyed the movie. In fact, I don't remember if we did toggle ratings on the comparison contrast last time.
I think we did.
But with Goodnight Mommy on Prime being just released, this for me would have been a solid 3 tacos. I enjoyed it.
I mean, it still is a 3 taco for me. Like, I'm not knocking tacos just because it's not as good as the original. But
no, not at all, not at all. And that's why, on its own merit, it's a 3 taco movie, and it's one that I would encourage people to check out
for sure
if you like, some
psychological thriller. It's a straight down the line psychological thriller.
Absolutely.
Goodnight Mommy, the Austrian version, is a straight up psychological thriller that turns into a body horror.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just no other way to deal with it.
Absolutely. So yeah, I would encourage folks to check out the Prime version of the movie. I think you'll enjoy it. Naomi Watts, I forget how good she is. We see her so sparingly now.
Yeah.
But I mean, she's really effective, and the kids they do a pretty good job. It was hard to separate them from what the portrayal of the original characters was.
Yeah.
I also found it interesting that the names of the characters in the Austrian film were the names of the actual actors.
Yeah, and the thing that drove me up the wall about the Prime version is that that they insisted on using the German pronunciation of Elias. It's like, you don't need to call them Elias. That is not how you would pronounce that name here. And that's
in the
not.
States,
like
maybe it was an homage.
It was obviously an homage. Like they didn't change the kids' names as as tribute to the original, but that doesn't mean you need to keep the pronunciation weird. Come on, man.
This is a good point.
Elias.
All right. Well, there you go. That is our comparison contrast. Again, check out the Prime version, and if you do check out the Austrian version, which hey, totally on you. Just remember, we warned you. It is intense. It is both are good movies. I really did enjoy them. I might have separated them by a day at least, but but I was on a roll. So, all right. Well, that brings us to a moment where we're going to take some time to share with you where you can find us on social media. So take a moment to check this out, and we'll be right back with more Real to Real Talk. All right, we are back as we continue our journey through this week's episode of Real to Real Talk. Paul, are you ready? Because it's your time to shine yet again.
But you're participating with me today, which I'm super excited about.
I know. I'm very excited about this.
This is going to be a longer conversation than we normally do for What the Hell Did I Just Watch?
Absolutely. So
I love when I get to do a new release out in theaters now movie for What the Hell Did I Just Watch? And this is no difference from that feeling. You and I went and checked out Moon Age Daydream,
absolutely
the David Bowie documentary that's out in theaters right now.
Yeah.
It's not a documentary. It's a theatric experience. To call this a documentary is going to mislead people to thinking that they're going to learn something other than the inside mental workings of David Bowie during this. You're not going to really learn much of anything about his life. And that's not the point of the movie, and that's why it's in the What the Hell Did I Just Watch. Man, I saw this in IMAX,
Okay.
and if it's still playing in an IMAX or large format theater near you, I I can't possibly recommend this movie enough. This is a weird heavy trip that I hope that people are open to taking.
This, you got to be a Bowie fan, man. I mean, and I am.
Okay.
I am. This is performance art.
Yes, 100%.
Very much performance art. And I will say, Paul, that in the midst of watching this film play out, there were times where I was like, "This." I mean, the obvious is to say this was not the movie that I thought I was going to go see, right?
Okay.
But I appreciated that about the overall experience, because while it was very trippy,
yes,
I loved the in such a trippy film, there was still an intimacy in which you actually felt like you were interacting with David Bowie himself.
Right, which is not something you get from a lot of documentaries.
Exactly. His was the voice.
Yes.
You know?
And the only voice, really.
Yeah.
You know.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I took notes. And like, so one of the notes I have is like, one of the things that I really liked was there was one part where they were airing an interview that he did sometime in the mid 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And he speaks openly about his sexuality during that, which actually changes through his life, by the way. Like, let's not even, try to dismiss that. Like his sexuality definitely, goes from very fluid to slightly more cis het, as he gets older.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that was fascinating to me is here he is opening up about this, and then the guy asks him about his shoes, and it's just so jarring. It is just so like people just didn't know how to deal with David Bowie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
here he is, the guy really sharing some very interesting insights that this 20-something year old guy has on his own existence, and the guy just feels the need to mention his shoes.
Yeah. Well, and it's a picture of the times.
Yeah.
That here you have this artist that is, to use an old cliche, he's in before his time. I mean, with the culture of the 70s and the way in which sexuality was viewed even back then.
Yeah.
I felt that same moment stood out to me because of the way in which the interviewer was so quick to want to get off to another subject.
Right.
And I think that moment really helped me to begin to understand the path of this film, which was to show us the evolution of one of the greatest artists of our time.
Yeah. And let's emphasize artist.
Yes.
All caps.
Absolutely.
Unbound.
Indeed. Because if you go, the reason I want people to watch this film is because you think you knew Bowie, even as a fan, but there's so much more that gets revealed about him through his own work and his own art. Before we continue with your thoughts, Paul, I want to insert something, because you had said, hey, when y'all go check it out, maybe Jen wants to jump on and her thoughts. She's never a fan of being on camera.
Okay.
At least not in a live format. But I do want to share this with you.
Okay.
Because I found this to be an interesting viewpoint. She felt that the film tried too hard to create some view of Bowie struggling with mental health. I didn't catch that myself.
Interesting. Okay.
But I think she found that, and I think it's because, as she mentioned to me, she found that the interviewers were always struggling with how to package him, because he's an artist that you never could.
Right.
Throughout the entirety of his career, he was evolving so often that it was almost as if the interviewers were trying to simplify it into something that there's drama in his life, there's trauma, there's this. He couldn't just be an artist.
Yeah.
That was this thing that she was left with. That it was unfortunate in her mind that is often how Bowie was, kind of encapsulated, when in reality he was just an artist that lived his art.
And it literally prompted me to write the question, in my notes: why did he ever agree to be interviewed? Because
He never seemed comfortable.
He never seemed comfortable. B, the interviewers always inevitably fell into a pit of I have no idea what to do with this person, except Dick Cavett. The Dick Cavett interview of ours, but he was probably the greatest interviewer of all time.
Indeed.
I mean, it's a shame. He's this.
I wish there were more clips of that interview in the film.
No, for sure. But also, I do think that the other interviews give you really good insight into the times. One of the interviews asked him about his hobbies, and his list of hobbies were just all these other art forms. Filmmaking is a hobby, sculpting, and all these, dear God, and it made me. And the movie is filled with interstitials, visual cues that play upon the musical cues that are going on at the time, whether they be actually related or not, just usually not related at all. And it just really made me wonder how many of these that we're watching, clearly some of them were works of David Bowie,
right?
Some, I wondered how many of them were, and it's just, and also we got to see David Bowie mime. I mean, it's what?
Yeah. I really, we got to, this really is a special movie, and it really was, in hindsight, as I sort of thought back through the experience, I was able to kind of discover why I loved it so much. Because in the moment coming out of the theater, I was literally like, what the hell did I just watch? Like, to steal your phrase.
Yes.
But after thinking about it, it was just such a beautiful tribute to an artist that people never could fully understand, and I don't think we're meant to. There's a few scenes within the film in his later years where because he hit a peak that Ziggy Stardust, there's a lot we remember him from his earlier days.
Sure.
But when you get to when he really sort of mid 80s hit that big arena, that sort of arena, or
dance,
stadium size crowds that they, and I was really glad that they spent quite a bit of time on the music in terms of like his performances.
Mm-hmm.
There was a point where, and it's even alluded to in the film, where when he hit the sort of that mainstream audience, that's sort of where he lost himself. I don't know if you caught that. And then it's in his later years that we see a lot more of the images of him and clips of him, creating art and painting. And, it was almost like being inside Bowie's head, as if he was recollecting what his life had been. And it's after the experience and having had time to think about it that I realized that what I loved about this film was a director's attempt to put us into the mind of David Bowie,
right?
As if to give him an opportunity to say, look, you can try to describe me, but you'll never be able to, because I was very rarely does an artist get to say how special they were.
Yeah. And I mean, he was like, they showed his paintings and they were phenomenal.
That whole series they showed of the individuals that he was painting in that German town.
Unreal.
Unbelievable.
Just like, oh my God, the depth of his soul was just, unparalleled, And so I'm going to hit you with some questions of like, what were your favorites?
Okay.
Like, I don't know if I'm going to start with my favorite quote. And I don't know if you remember enough to give a quote, but like, I literally wrote it down. But during one of the interviews, he said, everything is rubbish and all rubbish is wonderful. And I love that. I love that. I love the idea of, look, I'm not always going to succeed, but the act of trying makes it worthwhile. And that's just, I just love that quote. Did you have anything that hung out in your head as a quote?
I didn't write anything down so that I could quote word for word, but what I loved about the evolution of the interviews throughout the film, because they allowed the director allowed for the footage to show him as he evolved and aged and became always trying different styles of work and so forth. there was a clip toward the end where he talked about how, you know, and I'm paraphrasing severely, but basically that his art was his own, that he was going, you know, he's going to do whatever it is that's on his mind.
Right.
And you almost got the impression that he probably went through a bunch of managers, or like, you know, gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, studios or
Sure.
you know, that tried to sort of pin him down to something, and yet he was never going to allow himself to be that.
Yeah.
And that every time he felt like he was in that position, he removed himself. This was a person who, yeah, and this I think was a big theme of the film, was he was always moving to a different place so that he could let his art evolve. And while I can't give you a direct quote, that is the thing that for me was the most effective about this film, was that you really understood what an artist he was when in the mind of most he was a musician,
right,
which that alone,
yeah,
hey, one of the greatest of our time. But he was so much more, and it's because of his, you know, he said it more than once in the film, you're not going to pin me down to one thing or one style. I'm going to do what I want to do.
Right.
You know.
Did you have a favorite visual? Can you remember a visual or that you remember that sticks out of your mind that you really liked?
There was, I love concert footage. Like that's one of my biggest thing. But the scenes that, and it happened 3 or 4 times throughout, the joy on his face as he was painting with that large brush, and he had paint on his face, and it wasn't, I mean, he'd been working.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And every time they inserted something, that those
from that
images from that set of clips.
Yeah.
There was just something about that. And it was the look on his face of sheer joy.
Yeah.
Because when he was performing, and I always thought about this about Bowie before even this film, he never seemed 100% comfortable in his skin as a performer.
Right, because he wasn't in his skin as a performer.
Exactly.
And he says that in the movie.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
So to get these images of him happy, doing something that he loves to do, that's what's going to stay with me. Like those were my favorite moments, is because they went back to those clips quite a few times.
I can see that.
Yeah.
My favorite was there was again something that was interspersed throughout, where he's walking through some Asian metropolis city.
Yes.
I don't think it was Tokyo, and then he gets on an escalator and he's going down the escalator. Like just the vision of him going down like a 3-story escalator.
It's huge.
Yeah. He's going down and there's so many people coming up, and it's a wide shot, you know, where Bowie's on the left, everybody else is on the right. Yeah. And it's just this.
Yeah. Every single,
you know, it's just like everyone. And because he's not magnetic, he is the magnet, you know. It's just you know, right.
Yeah.
All right, you mentioned you love the concert footage. Which was your favorite like concert footage moment, do you think?
You know, for me, David Bowie, the music that really stood out to me as my favorite of his, of course, was, you know, I really wanted to see more Modern Love. They used it as an interlude, but Let's Dance, those big stadium scenes were great. But what I appreciated most was how much they hung on the early 70s Ziggy Stardust performances, because those aren't ones that I sat and have watched, you know, for any length of time. Because
when would you have the opportunity?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And so that was really a treat, because you know, that is when he as an artist was forming, and he didn't hold back, and he just did what he wanted to do. In fact, I always found it interesting where he ended up. I mean, I haven't had a chance to listen to his last album, because I was like, you know, he had become so mainstream by that point,
right?
That for me, the concert footage of him in his Ziggy Stardust getup, and then even there was a whole sequence. This is my now that I'm thinking about it, my favorite, absolute favorite part. There was a montage of clips of him dancing in his purely David Bowie style.
Yeah,
and that is the moment where I literally sat there going, I miss this artist. I miss David Bowie.
Yeah.
You know, he was so much more, and I learned more about him in this film. And you know, to repeat what you said earlier, this is not a documentary. This is a tribute.
Yeah, it's a
And yeah.
video experience. I love when he goes into Major Tom, and
Oh golly,
he absolutely owned
mm-hmm.
everybody in that, and
Oh yeah,
you can you see it in the audience that they are just like, you're, you know, we are yours,
yeah,
whatever you
yeah,
want to do right now you could do, and they just absolutely devour that song with to its fullest. And it's it clearly would have just been a transcendent experience to
yeah,
have been in, you know, at that time, in that state, in one of these venues with
yeah.
him doing it. Like, I would imagine that, you know, if you were in the stadium in 1982 or 83 seeing him do it, that would have been a cool experience.
Sure, sure.
But nothing would have beaten when he was doing it, you know, in the early 70s.
Right.
And just the unique perspective of everybody in that theater, you know, in whatever the venue happened to be. These were not, you know, mainstream people, you know.
No.
These were not mainstream people, and they adored him. And it was just so obvious with the Major Tom segment.
They felt he spoke for them. Yeah, I mean, he was their voice. That reminds me of one of the comments I wanted to make was what an effective use of his music throughout this film. When the credits start to roll and it's Starman, it's like, oh, come on. You want me to sit and watch credits? That's the song you play. You know?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So much good about this film. So Paul, it was did it win at Cannes, or
I don't know if it won
anything.
It was I would imagine it probably won something, but I don't know what it would have won.
So do we see this movie then in the running for, you know, an Oscar, or, you know, throughout award season, does this movie make an appearance?
I mean, it'll rattle some cages. I think it'll get I think it has to get a nomination, only because of how unique it is. You know, it doesn't have the the lack of narrative might hurt it. Bottom line.
I was wondering what you thought, because that is one thing that it is a challenge to watch at points, because it doesn't have this sort of
and it has the first two acts, and it definitely has a first, a second, and a third act.
Yeah.
The first two acts have such an energy that the third act just isn't able to maintain. But that's because that Bowie had an energy that he wasn't able to maintain. And it just settles into its third act rather than being like kabloom, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And
it peaks way early.
Yeah. I mean, it just does. But, you know, and that's not to say that what Bowie was doing later in life wasn't as interesting. It certainly was, but it's not as it isn't as much of an experience as you can put onto IMAX. And I just want to say, when they would start the music up and the whole theater would rattle, that was just so amazing.
I can imagine.
Oh,
I can imagine. I in fact, I don't know why I didn't know that it was going to be on IMAX, but that had to have been an experience. Did you in any way, and maybe this is the cynic in me, but did you in any way feel like the section about him and Iman was kind of wedged in?
I did.
Okay.
But again, it's the third act. And
right.
The third act, first of all, that's not the story they're trying to tell.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So let's be clear. If they had I believe if they had an interesting interview of David Bowie talking about him and Iman and how they met or anything like that, that would have been compelling to put up on screen, they would have done it. But they, you know, it almost feels like, for lack of that, it almost feels like maybe they shouldn't even brought it up at all.
Yeah, it
Like
was sweet, but it
yeah,
was like, okay, and then let's go back to the movie. That kind of thing is kind of how I
yeah,
felt.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
it's for me, it's a very, very nitpicky thought, but
No, yeah, I get it.
this
I
was
I
an
mean,
experience.
the
This
reality of it was that like there is for me the nitpick is the energy in the first two acts is impossible to sustain,
yeah,
and then especially when there just isn't as um you know genuinely compelling material for the
right,
third act. I mean, it's like
yeah,
there's still great stuff going on, but
sure,
it's not as manic as the first two acts are.
yeah,
And yeah, it comes to earth a little bit.
yeah, yeah.
Starman.
It was, and I'll say it again. This is an experience. This is
Yes.
not just a film. It's not just
Right.
a documentary. It's an
Right.
experience, and you got to go knowing that. So
Yeah.
I want people to see this. I really
Me
do.
too.
I mean, this is the love letter to the Bowie fans of the world. But
Hmm.
so many more should see it
Yeah.
because you get to visit the world and mind of an artist.
And it really is the pinnacle of non-narrative film,
Yeah,
of non-narrative storytelling. And to that end, I hope that it's something that people watch and then are more interested in seeking out some non-narrative films, because
yeah.
they can be really, really compelling.
Maybe this isn't
And
a fair comparison, but there was a non-narrative documentary we watched several like months ago. This does a far better job. This movie
yeah,
of
what was the other one? I don't.
there were kids in a school and I forget what the focus of the documentary was, but it was just video clip
I
upon
remember
video
that.
clip,
I
right?
remember that. Yeah, I remember that. I
This
remember that.
movie
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
does what that movie attempted so much better
Well,
because
yeah,
there was so
yeah,
much to work with,
yeah, yeah.
and so yeah, this I need to know what you're going to rate it because I know what I'm going
Okay.
to do.
Well, no, yeah,
I've been
no.
waiting because I thought either Paul is going to absolutely have loved this or
I
he's
did
going to
love it.
have
I did love it. I'm
issues.
giving it 5.
Okay,
It gets
good.
5 tacos for
That's
me.
me. That's
Yeah,
me.
it's just it's a special thing.
It is.
I don't if I'd seen it at home, I don't know if I would give it 5 tacos.
Okay.
But seeing it in the IMAX theater with the sound and everything, it's 5 tacos.
Gotcha. Yeah, and those 5 for me. And it ain't about not wanting to give it guac. It's just a
Yeah.
strong 5
Yeah, yeah,
experience of a film that I
Yeah.
hope people will check out. So
for show.
indeed. All right. Well, that is this week's What the Hell Did I Just Watch? I always love when I can participate, Paul. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And thank you for always bringing us fantastic stuff. So make sure y'all check them out week to week on What the Hell Did I Just Watch? Now, we get to this week's Real Alphabetical.
Oh, no.
And goodness gracious, Paul Britton, what did you do to me? The letter is J. The movie is The Jerk. This movie did not age well.
No? Okay.
No, sir. Funny. Sure. If I was back in the time in which this movie was made. I wasn't offended or anything. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
It was just like, I was so glad when it was done. This is just bonkers ridiculousness.
It is so funny.
It's funny.
So to be like, first of all, let's set the table.
Yeah,
I
please.
have been aware of Steve Martin for my entire life.
Right.
Okay. There is not a minute that I can think and stop and think and not be aware of Steve Martin.
Sure.
My mom has been thinking that she is funny singing King Tut for my entire life. Like,
sure.
My mom is easily the least funny person I know. Like, it's not her fault. It's just I have never. She's just incapable of making me genuinely laugh.
Gotcha.
Except, but she can absolutely make me laugh accidentally, though, with not on purpose.
Sure.
But I mean, I saw The Jerk probably when what year is this from?
Oh gosh, I should have written it down.
Let me see. The Jerk. Sorry, this is wonderful podcasting.
79.
70. Okay. So and it came out in 79. That means that I would have gotten we would have gotten a VCR in 79. And so I would have seen it shortly after it came out in theaters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, because it's one of the very first things that we rented. And the thing I remember about it most is it on the front of it, it had a short film where Steve Martin plays the absent-minded waiter. Have you ever seen this?
I haven't.
Okay, where like this couple is at this completely super posh restaurant, and Steve Martin's just a complete oaf as a waiter. And then gets their order. It's just everything. They're only there for 5 minutes, and at the end of the 5 minutes that they're there, Steve Martin says, "Okay, so I have your change, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600," and like he gives them $1,000 as they walk out. And so like the wife is like all throughout the experience, the wife is like, "I can't believe you brought me here," and the husband's just kind of like, just wait, and then it's so. I love Steve Martin. This is my way of saying that I love Steve Martin more than
sure.
And this movie has been with me my entire life, or forever. And yeah, I mean, I guess I can see where it may not. Maybe Steve Martin saying I was born a poor black child.
Okay, so there were two moments that genuinely made me guffaw, like laugh out loud. Okay,
yeah,
that one.
Mm-hmm.
Right at the very outset of the film,
and
not shortly after. Don't call that dog Lifesaver. You call that dog Shithead. That was hilarious.
Yeah, and then that's the name of the dog for the rest of the movie. I love the "Picking Out a Thermos for You" song. I love Jamie Lee Curtis in this movie.
Yeah,
it's insane that Jamie Lee Curtis just drives in as this hard ass motorcycle bitch, and it's just amazing. Carl Reiner just playing this like straight guy, that gets that wants to sue this idiot.
Yeah. There again, there and like you, I'm a huge Steve Martin fan. Like this is comedy legend.
Yeah.
Is an understatement. But again, and again, the movie wasn't bad. It was just like, oh, this is so much just ridiculous silliness. But I love
it is torrential ridiculous silliness,
frame after frame. The way in which the family's home at the end has evolved, but it's still the same, kind of the same.
They just live in a fancy shack.
It's clever. And so so I guess what I was left with when it was done was wanting to know why this one, because again, if we think about where my movie watching experience has evolved in just the time in which we've been doing the show, it was like, wow, this is kind of a huge step back. But this is an iconic film. This movie is like a treasure to people because of who it is and because of its nature. But it couldn't be made today in the way that it was made, and so and I love that we often have gone into that place, Paul, where we're like, this movie would not be made today, but thank goodness it was made, because it does what it does stand up to in terms of, does the subject material stand up to today's, no. Right. But what it does stand up as a great representation of the comedy of someone who says, this is the film I want to make. Mm-hmm. This is the story we're going to tell. And, crap on the critics and those who might say it's inappropriate.
Yeah.
We can't, those days are gone, Paul.
They just don't make comedies anymore.
They don't make comedies like that. And so
at all, period. Like comedies, period. Not comedies.
This was like risky in a time when we had a bit more of an open mind to this,
right.
So that I think is what I left with more than anything, was like, they just don't make them like they used to. They just don't.
Yeah. And I'm sorry that it was. Look,
don't need to apologize.
I'm not here to just give you highfalutin stuff to watch.
Of course.
Also, it's partially a result of the letter. I mean, there's just not that.
What's out there?
You
Thank you
know,
for not
so
choosing any Jurassic Park film. That's for sure. So.
well, I'm just glad you hadn't seen The Jerk so that I could give you something you haven't seen.
Oh man, I hadn't even thought
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got more conversation out of it than I thought we would. So thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I look forward to the letter K, which will be next week's letter, and we'll keep going from there. So I don't know if you already have a choice in mind, Paul.
I don't, and actually that's what I'm looking at right now.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, I'm sure you'll let me know when you figure that out. All right. We're going to have time for a real quick review of a movie that came out this past week. The movie Don't Worry, Darling. Man, I tell you what, it has had so much negative press for everything to do with, or I would say for nothing to do with the film itself.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of stay away from all that drama to simply say, wow, what a surprise this movie was to me.
I agree. I just went in expecting to dislike it immensely.
I loved it.
I really did not dislike this movie at all, let alone dislike it immensely.
Yeah, it's got some problems. Sure. Harry Styles, I think he emotes at one level.
Yeah.
But okay.
The message is super heavy-handed.
Big time.
Super heavy-handed.
Big time.
But I don't think that necessarily means it doesn't work. It's just,
not at all. It's a heavy-handed message, but I think a message that's important. The thing that I loved about this film was that, and this is one of those moments where I go back to, this was an effective trailer. The trailer for this film to me was very effective because when you finally get to the story, it goes in a direction that you're not expecting. You've seen the images, you know that it's about something to do with this place that they're in. It's probably not quite what it is.
Yeah, well, but yeah, I mean, by the time they get to the end, you have a general idea of there is something artificial about where they are.
Absolutely. Well, I think
and you're not exactly sure what the artificiality is.
Yeah. But did you like the reveal of what it was?
Yeah, I really liked it. I'm
like,
liked it.
This is a science fiction film. Like,
yes, yeah,
and that's not giving anything away.
Yeah,
listen. Florence Pugh,
she's so
phenomenal in this film. Phenomenal in this film.
She is just so electric, and I can understand if you don't attach to the Florence Pugh character immediately.
Yeah,
I could understand failing to follow this movie to the end and to its enjoyment, but I mean, if you're in on Florence Pugh, I don't understand not liking this movie.
It's a good film. Yeah, it's a good film, and I love the color of the the palettes that were used to portray the location they're in. I love the way in which everything was so stylized to represent this place that they're in. Chris Pine, fantastic.
Yeah. So over the top and wonderful.
Big time. Like he would, this is a chewing the scenery,
I mean,
moment.
This is the most Shatner he's ever been. and this is the guy who played Captain Kirk.
Right. So. Yeah. No, and I think he does it with good effect.
Yeah.
And so, but that contrast between where they are in the desert and the, it's just so much good about this movie. I hope people can get past all of the drama. I've only read a bit.
Get over it. Get
to this film.
Yeah.
Get to this movie because it's fantastic. Now I'm not going to give it 5 tacos.
No.
This is for me, and I'm going to be generous.
Yeah.
I was thinking 3 plus guac, but I'm going to give it a 4, and here's why.
Yeah.
It captivated me from the beginning to the end. I appreciated the payoff.
Yep.
It's a good movie. I want people to see this film.
I'm with you exactly for taco. That and the whole movie, I'm like, oh well, so far this is a 4 taco movie, and by the end of it, I was like, yeah, this is definitely a 4 taco movie.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The reveal worked. The social commentary works 100%. I just really liked it. I liked everything about it. I don't get the hate. I don't understand it. So that's all I will say.
Well, unfortunately, so much of it is based on not the movie and just the drama around it.
The reality is I listened this morning. I listened to another podcast where both of the people hated it. Now, one of them just was completely off base and thought, oh well, it wasn't good satire. It's like, it's not supposed to be satire.
What?
And and the other person was like, look, I was bored, and then I didn't care about the characters, so I hated the ending. And it's like, okay, well, if you didn't care about the characters, I get that.
Yeah.
But like, I wasn't
That's
bored.
on you.
The only reason why it's 4 tacos instead of 5 is because the second act, this is a 1 hour and 40-minute movie, and so you can trim off 20 minutes here and there and get to the 1 hour 45, and it's probably more effective. But it was perfectly effective for me. I liked it.
There were some very this is the kind of small detail I love about a movie like this. There were some scenes in the very beginning of the film that show the relationship dynamic between Harry Styles and Florence Pugh as a young couple.
Yeah.
That are made far creepier by the reveal.
Yeah, for sure.
It's such an effective movie. I really enjoyed it. I hope people check it out.
I do think that some of the imagery was like, okay, we don't need to keep seeing like eyeballs up close, and we don't need to keep seeing these creepy Busby Berkeley dancers. Like, they're not really anything.
It didn't add much to the
that stuff didn't necessarily work, but I know that stuff wasn't really part of the narrative, so I'm fine. Like, all right, yes, I would definitely edit those parts out if I were doing it, but it's fine. It's not like it's so overbearing that it's like an hour of that, and it's fine.
Yeah, it's just enough for me not to worry too much about it. So
exactly.
All right,
I've got a tornado warning.
All right, well, that's going to be the moment we're going to call it. So thank you, Paul. Happy birthday. Stay safe, please. Seriously,
I will.
And your family. But for now, we're going to say goodnight. Thanks, everybody. Wherever you are, stay safe. You're awesome. You're amazing. World's a better place because you're in it. Have a great night. Happy birthday, Paul. And we'll see y'all next time. Good night, everybody.
Yeah, baby.